very nice way of putting more content, interesting content in your biography is to discuss aspects of your life at certain times and look at the larger world, say what was happening at that time. I My grandfather who died in 1986 wrote his memoir. He was very thoughtful to have written such a piece. I didn't even ever meet him. I was only 6 when he died, and I'd heard about this man who was a pioneer, but he had some time. There was a civil war going on in Nigeria from 66, 67 to 1970. And it was a time of great difficulty. Lots of people who previously had good jobs suddenly had nothing to do, especially for my people who are from the Southeast, who were the ones defeated in the Civil War. And so that was a time when he suddenly had time on his hands. In a way, he had no job, and he decided to start writing certain aspects of his life history. And today, I don't know if I have it right here, but today, luckily, I have published his autobiography, and he writes about the Spanish influenza. This is in 1914. That's actually when his story starts. I believe, no, 1918. He talks about how during the time of the Spanish influenza, it had arrived on the West African coast. Mind you, this started in North America, is my understanding. And there was so much death and suffering and illness. And there were Catholic priests going around baptizing anyone who wanted to be baptized, right? Believing that to be to save their souls in case they died from Spanish influenza. And that's how my grandfather came to be baptized and became Christian. His generation was the generation that had the Western lifestyle thrust upon them. They were the generation that saw Europeans pretty much arrive in parts of Africa. And that was the time when Africa was divided into countries. And so here his generation is the one that had to suddenly have this new world, new style of doing things thrust upon them. So it was very enlightening for me, born much, much, much later, to learn about how things changed at that time. There were a lot of difficulty. You can imagine something you've done for hundreds of years, all of a sudden being told to do it differently. And so he describes it in some detail. And that's something that's very interesting. Looking at the larger world and putting it into your story, saying, I was 20, I was 20. I had just turned 20 at the turn of the millennium. And I remember being a medical student when there was this whole talk about Y2K. I remember trying to work through, anatomy and physiology, and people worrying about computers crashing, right? So you can put in that into your story. I remember there was a solar eclipse. I think that was in 2000, I believe, or 2001. So I could talk about what I was doing in 2001 and mention that my friends and I had to get these special glasses because there was a solar eclipse, and we were able to view the total eclipse from where I was at the time in Southern Africa, in Zimbabwe to be specific. So I have a lady I coached who describes how she's not really sure when she was born, but she knows she was a baby when there was a total solar eclipse across the West African belt in 1946 or 1947. And so that was really fascinating to me, interestingly, because my grandmother, of blessed memory, my father's mother, would always tell us about a certain day it went dark in broad daylight and people panicked People were running around looking for their children, crying about their children they left at home, and so on and so forth. And she picked up her baby and went inside the house. And the baby happened to be my father, who at this point is a man in his 70s, born in 1946. And so when this lady I coached told me the story, I was so excited because I'd heard this, right? I'd heard about this event. And she was then able to say she was a baby when this happened in early to mid 1947. And so it goes without saying, she was born sometime in 1946, and she took that to be her year of birth. So, very interesting. It makes for wonderful reading. It adds flavor to your story, thinking about the larger world. Even if it didn't particularly pertain to you, even if you didn't really know about it, you could say, in 19, I'm going to give a random example. The dates are not correct, okay? But you could say right about 1967, I was doing this and that at the same time that across the Atlantic, the Americans were trying to send a man to the moon. So you could put it in that way, even though it didn't really matter to you, but you're now able, in retrospect, to look back and say, oh, wow, when I was doing this is when that was happening across the Atlantic. And that makes for excellent reading. I believe that stories have the power to tie us all together when we think of different things going on in different places at the same time. That can add so much flavor, so much substance to your story. Makes for very, very fun reading. Hi, I'm Dr. Uche. I'm your friendly publisher, biography writing coach, book reviewer, a real life physician too. What are you waiting for? Go ahead and hit subscribe. That way you know when I upload new videos, share with your family and friends. Follow me on this fascinating journey as I talk all about stories on this channel, children's book read aloud sessions, fiction from across the diaspora, and tips to help you on your journey to writing your biography. You take care, and I'll see you in my next video.